Next, a sweeping blend of fantasy and realism, Angels in America, subtitled A Gay Fantasia on National Themes, is set in New York City during the Reagan era and focuses primarily on 8 characters who transport us from the South Bronx to the Kremlin and from Earth to heaven. The architect of this 20th century milestone in America drama is literary genius Tony Kushner, who opted for 6 months of reading and study before crafting parts 1 and 2 of Angels in America, Millennium Approaches, and Perestroika.
Antitrust suits, deregulation, environmental control. Complex cases like these need Justice Department cooperation like flowers need the sun. Wouldn't you say that's an accurate assessment, Martin?
I'm not here, Roy. I'm not hearing any of this.
No, of course not. Without the light of the sun, Joseph, these cases and the fancy lawyers who represent them will wither and die. A well-placed friend, someone in the Justice Department, say, can turn off the sun, cast a deep shadow on my behalf, make them shiver in the cold if they overstep. They would fear that.
Roy, I don't understand.
You do.
You are not asking me to go to Washington.
Shh. Careful.
Even if I said yes to the job,
it would be illegal for me to interfere with the hearings. It's unethical.
No. I can't.
The philosophies of Thomas Hobbes have struck you somewhat. Combine that with the McCarthy era, which was definitely a black spot, if not a black hole, in our country's history. And we have somewhat of the political orientation of Angels in a way.
I don't agree with, I mean, I don't know if it makes sense to say that you agree or disagree with Hobbes at this point, but what I wanted to explore with the character of Roy Cohn especially was the paradox that a political ideology that presents itself as being sort of positivist and determinist and sort of, you know, boosterish. I mean, you know, sort of everything's fine and everything's great. This is the greatest country. I mean, sort of exemplified in that kind of unflappable, smiling Ronald Reagan presence has this profoundly dark and gloomy and pessimistic side, and that in fact, of course, one of the great cornerstones of conservative thought is Hobbes, who is a tremendously bleak, terrifying, sort of nightmarish view of the world and of the state and of rulers and of what governance is. And so that paradox, I think, was embodied in Roy in a kind of remarkable way, that this sort of war cry of law and order, which has been the war cry of conservatives throughout this century, especially in the last 20 or 30 years. I mean, in Nixon's funeral, I was thinking about that a lot, that underneath this absolute fetishization of the notion of order is a complete embrace of a very scary, frightening kind of chaos. And I think Roy exemplified that.
Joe will be so angry. I promised him no more pills.
These pills you keep alluding to.
Valium. I take Valium. Lots of Valium.
And you're dancing as fast as you can.
I'm not addicted. I don't believe in addiction, and I never drink. And I never take drugs.
Well, smell you, Nancy Drew.
Except Valium.
Except Valium in wee fistfuls.
It's terrible. Mormons are not supposed to be addicted to anything. I'm a Mormon.
I'm a homosexual.
You know, we're rapidly becoming a world of codependence, and if we're not careful, our addictions, our afflictions can overwhelm us. And so maybe in Angels, you're trying to tell us to be somewhat more understandable, to be somewhat more tolerant in order to save the planet, perhaps.
Well, I mean, codependency is a term that I have a lot of problem with because it's sort of, I'm not completely convinced that, I mean, it sort of emerged during a decade when we were told that any kind of relationship was pathological and sick. And so I'm a little nervous about it. And then, of course, there are pathologies in relationships, and the play explores some of those. There's a way in which I also have a problem with the word tolerance, which I feel masks the power relationships that are necessary. I mean, to be tolerated, you have to be subordinate in a way, and there has to be somebody tolerating you who, by inference, has the ability to eliminate you if they decide to not be tolerant. And tolerance is not the same thing as equality, and tolerance is not the same thing as justice. There's a point in the play that I think looks very much towards questions of forgiveness, which is a much harder thing, and isn't really, I think, related to tolerance. But when someone is evil, or when someone presents you with an evil, how do you move forward into the future and make peace with the past? The play doesn't answer that question, because I don't know how to answer that question. I mean, I was thinking again, watching them bury Nixon, how basically happy I was to be rid of this man, and how revolted I was by the degree to which revisionists are saying now that he was this sort of great, wonderful, wise foreign policy statesman, when in point of fact I think that he was an absolutely atrocious president, and a threat to the Constitution, and destroyed Chile, and destroyed Cambodia, and destroyed Vietnam, and opened up Russia and China after having been one of the people that was instrumental in closing them down in the first place. So I find it very hard to forgive Nixon, and it made me think about the play all over again. It's like Roy is forgiven in the play, but he's forgiven once he's dead. And it's always easier to forgive once somebody's not around to make trouble for you.
Submit! Submit to the will of heaven!
What did you do? What? No! No!
Oh, the prophet was led by his nightly dreams to the hiding place of the sacred implement. And revision in the text. The angel did help him to unearth them, for he was weak of body, though not of will.
You cracked the refrigerator. You probably released a whole cloud of fluorocarbons. That's bad for the environment.
My wrath is as fearsome as my countenance is splendid!
It's interesting how you've elevated the human spirit by saying that ozone essentially is to the universe as AIDS is to the human body, and that, in a way, elevates the importance of each individual life and the human form.
It's, well, the actual metaphor, if you were gonna make an equation like that, would basically be that ozone is to the Earth as the immune system is to the human body. I mean, that the ozone is quite literally an immune system for the Earth. It comes from the Earth. It's something that's produced by algae and bacteria and plants, and it protects the Earth from danger from without, from certain kinds of radiation and light. Without the ozone layer, obviously, we can't live. And just as AIDS represents a systemic breakdown in terms of people's bodies, the breakdown of the ozone layer is a kind of autoimmune deficiency of the planet Earth. And I actually also believe that the two things are probably directly related, because I can't imagine that AIDS could exist without certain environmental cofactors.
You've created what I'd like to term the fifth wall. We certainly all have an understanding of the first four. The fifth wall being the passage from heaven to earth, or from somehow from earth to the hereafter, whatever form that might take, depending on what you believe. A lot of people are uncomfortable with that, but you've made the passage so comfortable in a number of your characters that in a way, when you watch both parts, you're comforted by the fact that you become acclimated to this passage.
To sort of a fluency between life and death.
It's comforting,
Yeah.
at least for me it was.
It's hard. I mean, it's a complicated thing. I think that as I sort of lurched my way down the road that led me to the end of Perestroika, that I didn't necessarily assess fully enough some of the theological implications, and I'm not sure what they are. I mean, I don't have any direct personal experience of people returning from the dead, and to a certain extent in the play it's a theatrical convention, and it's a metaphor, or it's a figment of someone's imagination. I certainly have an experience of longing so desperately for someone that you've lost that you almost imagine them in the room with you, or that you can smell them, or you can feel the kind of electricity they used to generate. But then, of course, they're not there. And I don't know. I mean, I'm a real genuine agnostic. I don't know if there's a God. I don't know if there isn't a God. I don't know if there's an afterlife or there isn't one. I feel like part of what I'm here to do, at least, is to wrestle with that question in the best way that I can.
And to help us wrestle with it as well.
Well, I mean, everybody struggles with it. I think it's always been a peculiar thing to me to meet someone of an absolutely convicted faith in any regard. I think that doubt, obviously, if there is a God, has to be part of what God intends for the world, because there is a cloud of unknowing, and there's just too much that we can't know certainly.
Let's talk about the natural order real quickly. In a way, angels rearranges the natural order of things.
Well, I don't believe that there is such a thing as a natural order of things. I mean, I would believe with Marx that we don't live in a world that's a natural world, because we're human beings, and that the self-creating activity, the activity that creates the social world, is the activity that makes us human, that's most specific to our species. And I think that we live in a world that is constructed. What we feel, who we are, who we want to go to bed with, how we see ourselves as male or female, Christian or Jewish or Mormon or Buddhist or Muslim, black or white. These are not natural things. These are things that we have constructed out of language and out of ideology. And as such, all of these things can be examined and interpreted and analyzed and transformed. And the natural world, the fact that a tornado goes down and devastates a Texas town, is not transformable. That's nature. That's something else. But I think that we are more victim to forces that we create through human error and through bad forms of social organization than we are to tornadoes and hurricanes and earthquakes.
I'd like to think, though, Tony, with the council, the final council, without giving away too much, that you do change the natural order of things. And somehow, somewhere between the other world and this world, you know, we have been elevated.
Well, I think that you could say that there's the hope that the worst will not happen, and that there is a reason to keep on going, and that order, I think.
It's going to be 2 films, Tony, and you're writing the adaptations for film.
Yep.
Busy guy. And a 1-act over here, and this, that, and the next thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to be difficult to take the live element out of this piece and put it on screen.
Well, I mean, I think that I've gotten the director who is most spontaneous and most able to capture a sense of life as it happens. I mean, that kind of non-random randomness and ordered disorder in an Altman film, and the epic sprawl of an Altman film feels exactly right. So I think he's perfect for it. And I mean, sure, it's not going to be My Angels in America. It's going to be a Robert Altman film.
You can't outrun your occupation, Jonah! Hiding from me one place, you will find me in another. I stopped down the road, waiting for you. You know me, prophet. Your battered heart, bleeding life in the universe of wounds. Vessel of the book now, all exemplum paralyticum on you, in your blood. Rewrite, have written. Stasis! The end.
Thank you for joining us on National Arts. I hope you enjoyed meeting Bebe Neuwirth, certainly one of the most talented actresses on Broadway today, and the brilliant Tony Kushner, whose Angels in America has revolutionized American drama. Until next time, remember, art was meant to be appreciated, so you be a part of it.